work. There we go. All right. So I hope everyone can hear me all right. And first, I had a fun time doing this last time. Got part of the way through mixing this track, Wizard. You heard it in the intro. We're gonna continue with mixing the Wizard, and it's a track by Ghetto Benny. Collection B. We're in Collection B, and so it's a great track, and first of all, though, I want to show off some racks that I've been working on. Some people who I'm friends with, who I do music work with, they're already aware of the tracks that racks I've been trying to develop, and I kind of sneak peeked them at on the last stream. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in a little deeper in the beginning. So check it out. When they're actually available, I'll go ahead and share out the links for them. And then I'll probably release a YouTube video where I actually go kind of something that's shorter and not just a live stream like this that really dives in deep and kind of shows what you can do with them. But I figured if you're watching this, you're probably interested in music production. So I figured I can get a little more technical and show a little bit more of the inner workings of these racks. One of the racks is just an updated 2.0 version of an older rack that I did. You can watch the video of me kind of showing how it works on my YouTube channel, Kevin Savage TV. And that's this Peekaboo Effects rack right here. I've got this bass shaper, which I showed a little bit of it, and I actually use it here in this Wizard mix. And then I'm going to show off this really awesome piano rack that I made. Keep in mind, all of these plugins require Ableton Suite, and the latest version of Ableton Suite. So if you're not using Ableton Suite, then it won't work. And they do require a little bit of user knowledge. Obviously, it's they're pretty good, but you're still going to have to kind of know, they're pretty good for people who don't know a lot about the racks, but you're still going to need to know something to be able to use them. I'll show it off here, and then, of course, when I do the video and for each one of these three racks, I'll show what exactly to do. And then the piano rack requires you to have the latest version of Contact 5, as well as the Giant, which is kind of where I get the piano sound. I'll probably release a version that has the Giant piano because I really like what this rack does with the piano, or with the Giant, but I'll probably try to do one also that uses a stock piano from Ableton, maybe play around with it to get it to sound as close to the Giant as possible. It's going to be hard because I know the Giant, I believe, is sampled from a very large piano, so that's a little tricky, but we'll see what we can do. If I can have it sound good enough, then I'll be happy with sharing that, and then anyone can use it as long as you use Ableton Suite 10. You might be able to pull in Ableton Suite 9. I'm not entirely certain. I don't have 9 anymore, so I can't really test that out. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm going to start off the stream going over, and then we'll dive into the mix, probably layer some more sounds, show off some routing, and see how far we get. I don't really know how long I'm going to stream, but I've got the rest of the afternoon to stream, so it'll be fun. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, make sure to drop them in the chat. I do have the chat pulled up on my phone because I have not quite figured out how to get it on the screen without it just being an obnoxious space taker. I don't have a second monitor. And then, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the chat. All right, so I'm going to start off with the Peekaboo 2.0 rack and just quickly kind of show it off. I say quickly, it'll probably not be quickly, but I have this sample right here. I'm going to disable the rack. And it just sounds like this. It's a really simple... Oh, that's not disabled. Disabled. So it's a really clean-ish sub that I got from the Cymatics Viper pack. You'll see that I use a lot of Cymatics stuff. I've been a longtime fan of Cymatics. So, and they just have great samples. So we have this Viper 808 sub. If you're not listening onto headphones, it's probably going to be tricky to hear it, but this is what it sounds like. I'm going to go ahead and loop this out. And basically, the goal of the subs. So I developed this rack originally because I was trying to recreate the peekaboo sound. He's a left field bass and kind of dubsteppy producer, and his bass just has a quality of it. This like I always call it like a ring mod sounding bass that he uses in these drops, and I was like, I really like that. It kind of catches you off guard. So I want to go ahead and try to remake it. So I spent some time on YouTube trying to figure out, and Reddit and stuff like that, trying to figure out like what exactly he was doing. I watched a live stream with him, and I think it was Company talking. No, it was him and AT Aliens talking about one of their tracks that they put together, and they kind of give you a glimpse into their project file, and this kind of helped me figure out the signal flow. So basically, the goal was, can I turn this sound into this sound? And then what can I do to then modulate this sound? You know, that way, if I want the drop bass to kind of change in the drop to kind of have some movement and fluctuation, what sort of macros can I set up? So the original rack did not have this bottom section. So what I was kind of, I don't remember exactly what kind of inspired me, but I was watching another video online and I was like, well, what if I can modulate this sound to have some extra movement? And so I put this kind of wave shaper into the rack by using the Autopan stock plugin here. So basically this rack allows you to then modulate it. So it goes from this to this, which can be really cool in like a drop, you know, depending on like modulating it, having this kind of this rate go, because there's also this rate feature. So you want some triplets. Now, of course, it's not perfect. You kind of have to play around with these features, but that's essentially what is the most new in the rack. What sets it really apart from the old rack and this 2.0 version. So, you know, this rack allows you to do some pretty cool adjustments in sound to really kind of fine-tune the sound that you are looking for. So I'm going to turn off the LFO and just play the sound. And the mid drive here allows you to kind of adjust the mid frequency, which is where a lot of the sounds are at. So from 0, and the key thing to keep in mind when playing around with this kind of rack is you gotta keep in mind the sound is going to change. Obviously, you're not going to want to set this and then set this. It's going to be a lot of kind of going back and forth to find the sound that works. So and then what's also important is if you know what the key of the sample is, which it's C sharp, I set this tuner in here. Now, you don't really have to worry. Like, if you're really, you know your numbers, you can obviously see that this is a C sharp 1. But if you dive into here and you look in the Kick Tight Corpus plugin, you can actually see the pitch change. So, you know, if this is a different key, or maybe I wanna tune, because this tune macro affects all of these chains. So this this will change all of them. So, you know, maybe I think right now it's a C0. I thought it was C1. But let's say I go to like a C1 or C sharp 1. Like that's going to change the sound compared to a C sharp 0 a little bit. It's not a ton, but it's a little bit of tuning. And that can really help you kind of keep everything in the key that it is, so it's easier to then flatten and render and and make sure that your mix sounds good. Then we have the bass, which modulates the saturator. Now the saturator is basically the the most important feature of this rack. It is what causes this sound. Like, I mean, if you change this from a sinoid fold, like let's just focus in on the mids, right? And I change this to like analog, it's a whole different sound. Like that's what really brings out that ring mod sound. And what I wanted to do was kind of give you as much control over these sounds as possible through macros and macros and chains. So it's not you're not just changing one particular piece, you have more control over all of them. And that, if you dive in a little bit deeper, I mean, you can keep it really basic. If you are new and you just like the sound and you just want to play with the sound, you can just keep it with the macros. But maybe you want to dive in a little bit deeper, you can create multiple chains if you really wanted to, so you can then mix it properly, where you have, the top chain is one channel, and then you've got the mids, low, mid, sub, and you can mute these features. I think probably, if you're going to mute anything, the thing you're going to probably mute in your track is probably the sub, because you probably have your own sub. But keep in mind, if you're going to be doing this rate shaping or this wave shaping, you're going to want to you might want to keep everything in one channel. It just really kind of depends on how you have your track set up. Also, to keep in mind, you do have the shape, which goes between a sine wave, LFO. So if we do this, you can also change the shape from a sine to a square, which you'll get a little bit of clipping, but that could be nice in your track for whatever reason. Or you could go somewhere in the middle. It's a little more abrupt, and you can see what that's doing if we go into the LFO rack. You can see the auto pan change. So, and then of course LFO is just the amount. If you just want a little bit of wobble, or if you want it to basically be completely silent. And then noise is let's see if I remember it right. Noise, I believe, basically just affects the top end. Let's see here. What is this macro doing? On the mids, I believe, and the low mids and the top, I have a noise rack. Yeah. Which allows you to increase the dry wet. And if you want to, you can of course adjust the sample from being like the sample rate. If we dive in, it's basically you are modulating or macroing between the wet and the dry signal. I keep it the same. I don't have enough macros here. Maybe down the road I'll create a Max for Live device that has much more knobs, but I didn't really have a lot of control. So, I kind of said, well, let's come up with a good noise setting, and then from there, just allow you to adjust between the dry and the wet signal. But you could always adjust the bit rate and the downsample if you wanted to. Yeah, so that's what this noise macro allows you to do. And I believe I have a noise rack on all of the, I guess it's maybe just the top. Yeah, it's just the top end. Allows you to give it a little bit more crunch. A lot of times people like to layer white noise in, so this is kind of your option to be able to layer your own kind of like white noise that will be modulated by the LFO if you choose to do so. So that is the Peekaboo bass rack, bass shaper, I think is what I call it, bass something or the other. But it makes you basically be able to create a sound that sounds very much like Peekaboo, which has a very unique quality. Just to show off a little bit of what's going on the top, we have the noise rack with an erosion and a bit crusher, an FX EQ8, which really keeps it separated from the mids and the low mids. Compressor. Excuse me. Something to keep in mind. This isn't adjusted at all in the in this part of the rack. So something to keep in mind, which I'm glad I looked into here so I could mention it. You do have some control over some grain delay. So possibly you might want to add a little extra flair. This is mostly for the advanced users. Say you want to add, a little bit of this grain delay onto the top of our noise. You can actually kind of widen the sound. Again, if you're not listening to this on headphones, it's probably gonna be a challenge because it's really light. But you can kind of hear this crackle. You can adjust the time delay and the spray, and that can be a nice little ambience to add on on the sound. Kind of widens the sound in a way. It's great for filling in spaces in the frequency that you need to fill in to be able to fill out the mix and kind of build energy. So the grain is also, it's there on all of the channels, the signal chains. So you can honestly really kind of fine tune what you want. So, maybe the top will have this and the mids will have this. Oh, and it also kind of does affect the sound in a very interesting way. Kind of muddies it up. And it could be really cool if you have some sort of like an 808, like this drop using this bass, and then you want it to kind of totally disassemble into the break. This could be a really cool way of automating that aspect of the of the track. So pretty cool. Some OTT, obviously, and when you're adjusting. Yeah, when you're adjusting the low-mid drive, you're kind of pushing the amount of OTT into the signal. So when this is released, keep in mind the grain delay, keep in mind, what you have here. And, honestly, dive into the inner workings of this rack. I'm not trying to keep anything a secret, It's all just for the good of the music, I like making these sounds, and I, especially for something like this, I release it for free in my store. So when it's available, I'll probably launch this plugin to make it available to people when I release the video that actually showcases it and what it can do kind of in a song. So that is the bass rack. I don't think there's anything else to really show. I guess keep in mind you can adjust the levels. I have this in a very particular setting because I think it balances out nicely, but maybe you want to bump this up a little higher or pull the top down or whatever. You can obviously do that too. There really isn't anything else to keep in mind. Just, I guess, this is going to work the best if you have Ableton 10 suite. So that is the Peekaboo bass rack, whatever it's called. So I showcased this a little bit, the bass shaper, and it's actually being used in this song. But I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit to like what exactly is going on and how do I make this work. So I'm not super classically trained. Actually, I'm not classically trained at all. I know a little bit of music theory, but it still kind of is a hang up on my production skills. So I prefer sound design, but I'm trying to get better at actually being able to play music out on, like on a piano or something like that. So what I have here is is my bass maker, 808 maker, whatever. And this is what it sounds like it's just MIDI, so there's no sound if I were to turn this off. But this is, let's pull this down, make it completely clean. So it's a really nice, clean 808 sound. Super clean. It is, so if you look at why it's clean, I basically used a very clean 808 right here, taken from ONJ's Main Stash 2.0, fantastic sample pack that he put out on a Google Drive. And I mean, if I wanted to, I guess I could have created in Operator a clean 808, which would be a little bit easier. But I don't know. I just like his 808 sound right here. Maybe down the road I'll make a 2.0 version that uses only stock Ableton plugins and samples. But this is the only thing. When you do download this shaper, keep in mind that, and this is why when I'm going to release it, it'll come in like a zipped file with like a project and stuff like that. You got to drag the sample into, I think this is Simpler. Simpler. So you just have to drag it in, just so that the computer recognizes it, and then you can save it. And from there, once you save it, you'll be solid. But I have noticed that when I've tried to put it on like a friend's computer, you do need to have the sample along with it. So the sample is included in the rack or in the project file, or will be included in the project file, as well as the .adg file, which is what you're going to need. I can't just give out the .adg file. I realized like otherwise you're missing the whole sound. So if I start at the top and I go down to the bottom, what we have here is we have a scale MIDI effect, which basically allows you to stay in key. So right here, you can go all the way up and down, and basically it is an Ableton MIDI effect that prevents you from playing out of key, which is useful in some cases, like for myself, especially with an 808. But it can also be a challenge if you're someone who wants to play something a little more unusual. So, yeah, I mean, essentially what it does is whatever note you're playing, it pushes it to the next nearest note in the key or in the scale. So you can also turn this off if you don't really know what the song is, but you came up with a cool 808 riff. So yeah, we have our glide time here. Now this, I probably should have honestly swapped these around, but glide time is what allows you to make that really interesting 808 glide. In FL Studio, it's super easy. In here, it's not as easy. But let's say I'm terrible at these glides, but let's just put a note. So we got F2. Let's put a note an octave higher. Basically, adjusting this glide rate should allow us to basically, it's playing this signal, and then it goes up and down. So let's see if this works. Yeah, it allows you to basically give a little bit of movement to the sound. So if we just keep playing this, we can adjust the glide of the sound right here. It adjusts the time, 47.6 milliseconds. I'm not entirely certain, like, the timing, like, what you necessarily need to keep in mind, but let's try this. Basically, this is how long it'll take for it to go from the note that it's already at to the next note. So if it's much longer, you won't hear it at all. And if it's shorter, it's like an immediate thing. So if you've, especially this is useful if you want to slide into a much longer, you know, if you have a much larger note, having a really short glide time is gonna, it allows you to get to it quickly, but it may not be what you want it to sound like. It's almost like it's playing after it, whereas if I bump up the glide, and so what you're going to have to do with this is kind of figure out, okay, what sounds right. And that's why I created it as a macro. So, you know, in one part of the song, this might sound right, 108 milliseconds. In another part of the song, 48 milliseconds might sound right. So it's really going to depend on, what you're doing in the song. It's not going to be like a one size fits all. I would say this 808 maker is probably in the more medium to moderate to advanced range of like Ableton knowledge. So keep that in mind. So this is, by the way, this is the sample controls. The only thing you really need to keep in mind here is that glide is on and that it's at 108 milliseconds. Now, of course, if you don't want that glide, you just change it to 10 milliseconds, or you can turn it off here if you wanted to. This also only works, the glide only works with, it's essentially mono. It only works with a single note. So if you want, you could do portamento, that's more than one note, but with an 808, you're not probably going to have more than one note. It's going to sound weird if you do. So we have, let's go ahead and get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. And yeah, that should be good. So moving on, we have sample fade. And basically what this does is it allows us to basically change the release of the sample. Now you could obviously adjust this, having it set to 60 seconds and then it's here, it's not going to work. You'll hear it chop off. So if I were to just create a really long note, now I have it set to loop. I guess I could turn this off, but it'll chop off. This is set to 60 seconds. I could probably tune this back because like that is going to, like you're going to hear a clipping sound. Now you could obviously adjust this out. I would say don't adjust it any further than like there. But you're still like 60 seconds honestly could probably get pulled back. And then this loop would just allows you to basically loop it there, but I'm probably going to kill that for when I release this. But maybe you are playing a shorter set of riffs and you only want it to ring out with the notes that are longer, right? So, and in some cases, sometimes it just ending at a point, like especially if you're doing at a, like it goes like a kick and then a snare, you want the 808 to end right before the snare starts. So, you know, having this capability of it just chopping off right there can be very useful in some drops. But this release time is super useful because, in fact, I could probably set this to like 4 seconds or something like that, which is the max that this goes to, or less. Is it 4 seconds? Yeah, something like that. But yeah, so like if we were to adjust the sample fade, which adjusts the release down here of the sample, But this also, if you were over here, yeah, I'll be playing around with the sample fade a little bit, honestly, because I want it to be something that will kind of just fully trail out. So probably, honestly, setting this to here. But it really does depend, because you may, and I wish there was another spot for me to macro this, but you may want to automate this piece of the sample depending on the track that you're making, because in some cases you might want it to legitimately kind of just fade out, and in some places it stop. And so knowing sample fade, knowing that you've got this this marker here, and keeping in mind that you have loop or snap turned on is important. So that's sample fade. I think I'm going to shorten this again. And you could, of course, adjust the... Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so depending on, obviously, here... here is, like, it fades... It doesn't even fade. Like, you need a really short note for it to fade out, but... So that kind of, honestly, kind of fades it out at like releases it at the right time for the sample, like especially with how long the mini notes are. Honestly, with any of these racks, it's all about playing with them and making them work for you. The gain, when I start diving into the actual shaping of the sound, the gain here, I believe if I remember right, yeah, here we go. The gain is this overdrive pedal, or this pedal right here. If I bump the gain up, trying to be able to see everything here. Kill the macros here, yeah. So if I adjust the gain, that's going to adjust that gain knob. So clean. Pushes the signal a little bit, but this gain is going to be important when you start getting into some of these other sounds, like grime. If you really want that distorted bass sound. So if you like that little ring at the top versus that, this tone knob kind of allows you to add that overdrive. And then, oh, that's what it is. So gain, keep in mind with gain, you're going to also have to boost the crush a little bit. So gain is really not going to work unless you push the crush. So we've got gain at 0, which means if we dry wet it, you'll get some of the signal. Right? Then as we increase the gain, you almost go from like these like 808s for like a chiller track to like something like super aggressive and gritty, kind of almost going back and forth between almost like this like R&B vibes to like straight up like hybrid trap dubsteppy vibes with the 808s, or just straight up like left field bass. Kind of like I feel like if you were to create a really cool, just really long 808 in here and then push it through Peekaboo, using these two in conjunction could create some really unique sounds. The signal flow for this is basically we have the shaper here, which is pushed into a saturator. Now the signal then from the saturator is pushed into this frequency splitter, which divides it between a top and a bottom. I've EQ'd out the top and the bottom, so top, bottom, and then the top is pushed into the overdrive and a pedal, and the bottom is just kind of kept relatively clean. Obviously, you're pushing that signal and you're increasing it with saturator. The grime adjusts how much saturation you're giving it, so no saturation, full saturation, and it's an analog clip. Honestly, if you're savvy with Peekaboo, start playing along with these samples. I mean, if we were to do this, could get some really interesting sounds. And then everything is glued together at the end with a glue compressor, which is a pretty simple, little bit of cutting back the threshold, increasing the makeup gain, but pretty good at a soft clip. So it's not the most complex rack. Its complexity is in you knowing how long you want that sample to kind of ring out and adjusting those parameters accordingly. So that is, my 808 thing. I'll turn that off. Sometimes Ableton does this split solo thing, and I can never quite tell what exactly is going on. So ignore that. So now we're going to move on to something I'm really excited about. I do wish that the sample, the plugin that I'm using in the piano was a stock instrument, but it's not. So here we are. I will try to do my best to go through exactly what's going on here. But basically the root of the sound. So pull back. This allows you to take and create anywhere from a very dry piano sound to a very ethereal pad piano sound. So this is a MIDI loop that I've got. It sounds like this. Sounds really good. Oh, there's still a little bit of... So it's mostly dry. I think if you were to go in, you could fully dry it out in the contact player, but... you could probably fully dry it out in the piano player. But give me a sec. I'm getting a notification. My Apple Wallet gave me a notification. I gotta make sure I have money. Oof. Uh-oh. All right. Hopefully, I used the wrong card to make a payment on a thing off Amazon, and I just want to make sure that I don't get dinged. All right. Cool. So, all right. Going back to the piano. So basically this, originally I was using just this basic, the Giant. I always found like the Giant just, even though it's called the Giant, it doesn't sound giant. So I was like, well, what if I just boost the saturation and blah, 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 blah. I was like, well, that's kind of cool, but it's still like, what more can I do with it? So I made some adjustments to the Giant here, and there's even some of the macro knobs on here adjust things on the Giant. But that just wasn't enough. And I was like, well, what if I could play with, like, set up a macro to play with, like, the reverb and really kind of come up with these very lush sounds? So, you know, that had me kind of thinking, and I started playing around. So basically what I've got going on with here is you have this rack allows you to kind of have this very, very more dry signal. Excellent. Let's see here. There we go. That's a bit drier. I mean, it's still got something going on, but it's a bit drier. But it's a very, very nice chord that Cymatics provided with great velocity. If you're probably to look at this, yeah, you could totally see that like this was played by someone on a MIDI keyboard who knows what they're doing. So this is basically what the piano sounds like without anything on it, which is nice, but like it doesn't cut through a mix, especially for what I wanted to do with as kind of like the main instrument, even though it's called the Giant. So if we bust up the mix saturation, mix compression, this just basically automates these factors. So you've got the dry wet, and then this right here, which is the dry wet on the glue compressor. So you can parallel process the sound. No parallel processing. Parallel processing. And it's not really making the soft clip work, but... And then we have the saturator right here. No saturation. Full saturation. Now, obviously, this is going to play more of a factor when you start to play with these knobs and these knobs, but it's still important to know kind of what these are doing. And then you have boost, which plays with the saturator right here. So basically, this allows you to fully slam it. So sorry about your ears. But maybe you want some like crazy slammed sound. Or maybe you want to parallel process that. Could get interesting. You're probably not gonna need it up that much. Usually, like, what I like to do is I like to push it until it distorts. So it's distorting around there, so pull it back. We'll set it to like 13. So just under that. Okay, it's still pushing it. Let's try 10. It's still got something. Let's try 9. It's almost there. Let's try 8. Still doing something. I think 5. That sounds nice. Just a little bit of boost. And then, oh yeah, you have, so in the contact instrument, we have these two parameters, which are the color and the tone, I I think is what it is. No, it's not the tone. It is in the anatomy. Is it the tone? Where is it? I'm adjusting something. The color. Oh, the resonance. That's what it is. So you're adjusting the resonance and you're adjusting the color with these knobs. So this allows you to kind of provide a little bit. So maybe you want something that's much more punchy, or something that's more pulled back. So as you see, it adjusts between soft and hard. And then this kind of pushes some resonances into the track. So it's a matter of honestly playing with it until it sounds like something is right. Great. So let's get to my favorite part about what this does. And it just, it's so good. So what I've got here are two features. You've got the dry wet macro and you have the decay macro. Everything else doesn't really matter. I've already kind of set it up. If you wanted to, you could play with the low cut or high cut or stuff like that. But keep in mind that this is not being parallel processed. This is just your processing. I mean, you could parallel process it with the dry wet, but that's about it. Now with this, the beauty of this, right, is it really allows you to turn this into something really beautiful. So let's keep it with a low color and just start playing with it. So, let me make sure things aren't. So obviously right now it's not going to be doing much of anything because it's like 200 milliseconds of 100% reverb. I guess it does something. I guess if you slammed this, that could be interesting. But let's pull it back. Let's put it at like 50. So we're still hearing some of the, not 550. So we hear some of the dry signal. Along with the wet signal, and that's super useful if you start playing with like the color and just having those harder notes being pushed in. But the beauty comes when we start to adjust the decay time. Maybe you want something really pad-like. Yeah, it is such an amazing set of like rack, in my opinion. what, like, I love it. I love playing with it. I love the interesting sounds I can get. You know, I can then flatten that and like reverse it to use it as something, or you know, you could, especially if you're just playing chords, and then you separate the chords and the melody. Like this is a little tricky because we're playing with both the chords and the melody, and maybe we want the chords to ring out, but we want the melody to kind of play on top as a bit more of a drier or less processed signal. So super useful when you start to think about like what you can do with something with this. You can make some very, very interesting, some incredibly interesting sounds. So yeah, definitely excited about this rack, and I'd love to try to figure out a way of making, I'll probably make this as like the contact version, but then have release one that's just the stock plug. So it's been almost an hour, and I have not gotten to mixing. Just been showing off the inner workings of these plugins. So what I'm probably going to go ahead and do is take a very, very brief break, maybe for like 5 minutes or so, and then we will come back and get into mixing this track. So let me go ahead and do this, do that, do this. Come back out here, 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 and let's go. All right, you guys, I will be back soon. So, yeah, stay tuned for mixing in Ableton. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Peace. All right. We're back. I'm still trying to get the hang of OBS. I need to get some hotkeys or something like that so I don't have this thing constantly popping up every time I'm trying to switch between the little title screens. So, all right, cool. So before I get started on actually mixing, I'm gonna get rid of these guys. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about these new racks that I've been working on. I did want to shout out, I've got a remix coming out with Annie Delgado, a good friend of mine. She released a song called Galaxy. It's kind of electronic, lo-fi-ish vibe, and she asked me to do a remix, and so I did a remix. I actually used that Peekaboo bass rack in the remix. It's a really dark remix compared to the song, and that, I believe, is dropping January 31st, I think, is the date. So here in a few days, I will be jumping in on a live stream with her. Probably, I think it's on Instagram that we're doing it, to kind of like listen to the song and talk about the song, and I'll probably, share. I don't know what I'm going to share, but she asked me to be a part of it, so it'll be fun. So if you are interested in that, keep an eye out on my social medias, whether it's whether it's Twitter, or Facebook. I tend to be really bad about putting stuff on Instagram, so I'm trying to get better at that, but definitely like Twitter or Facebook or whatnot, and you should have an idea of when and where and like what to expect. Also, I do have a lo-fi track that is out and available on Spotify. I'll pull it up really quickly. Kevin Savage, right here. So right now, this is all I have out. I release music under two different names. So Kevin Savage is kind of the like beat or like beat work or like lo-fi stuff, and then Bass Savage is what I go by when I release music under that's more like remix or like rhythm, dubstep, left field bass, stuff like that. I think eventually I'll probably consolidate the two, but right now it's kind of how I'm working. It would be a non-$sign Savage if there wasn't already some asshole taking up the non-$sign version, but it's whatever. I kind of like it with the $sign in it. So Kevin Savage, you can find that on all the social medias, my website, which is, I'll share that as well. Boom, kevinsavage.nyc right here. The link to my Bass Savage page is right there, that I need to update. The store, when it comes to these racks, you can go there. There's a portfolio here with all my music. The kind of all the little things that I've done is all available right here. So you can check that stuff out. Some of the projects that I'm working on, I try to share here. So I did a track with Rocky Pantera, and I did two projects with Business Insider that you can check out. These should link you directly to those projects. I did the music for these videos. Let's see here.
A live bookkeeper is helping
I
customize
don't know if you can
QuickBooks
hear.
Okay, you're all set up.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can hear it. Cool.
That was my business key.
We got an ad.
This one's casual.
A drone scans 150 acres of wheat in Argentina, checking each stalk one by one. It spots the beginnings.
So yeah, you can hear kind of the music that I was doing for these projects. And if you want to contact me, of course, hop on here, shoot me a contact. So yeah, then I do have a podcast. I haven't really been as frequent with it. This will link you to all of the podcast stuff. So In the Studio with Kevin Savage is my podcast. You could basically catch it on any platform that does podcasts. And then if you want to go to my YouTube page, you can go here. It's like Kevin Savage. It's like youtube.com/c/Kevin Savage TV. I will be uploading the live streams here And then I've done some work where I kind of will like clip up some of the in the studio clips. If you look up here and you've got this, excuse me, ITS WKS is the Indus Studio with Kevin Savage. And so you can find all that stuff there. I try to organize stuff pretty good. This is the first Peekaboo bass rack video. This is by far the most views that I've gotten. It's pretty sweet. I think it's because if you go into it, it's a terrible audio quality and video quality in my opinion, but people liked it, and some people do. This guy, I can't even hear you. But I basically have a link where you can sign up on my mailing list, and that will, let's see here, sign up to the mailing list. That will pull up, that will basically automatically send the first version of the Peekaboo Effects Rack to your email. So, pretty cool. I think that's basically it there. Oh, and then services. So I do offer audio services, whether it's like custom music, reach out to me, shoot me a message on, just find me. It's pretty easy, contact whatever, and I'll basically make music for you if that's something you're interested in. We can talk about prices and stuff like that. I do some consultation, whether it's social media management related stuff or marketing. And then I can also do some track feedback. We'll talk about the prices there as well. Contact me there. And then down here you can connect to any of my stuff, my social media stuff, Facebook. It's all of them should be Kevin Savage NYC. I try to make it as like straightforward as possible. Instagram, the gram. Yeah. I don't have TikTok on here because I don't really do it as much. I'm trying to get more into that. And then, of course, Twitch right here. Twitch right here. All right, cool. So those are my social media links. You can find them all on the website. They should be on every page. Down at the bottom. So that is that. I hope you guys enjoyed your little break. And I think the game plan is definitely to work on mixing this track, Wizard, and then Big Betty is another track that I was working on with Zach last night. And I might work on that some today, but honestly, by the time I'm done getting this really mixed, I'm probably going to be a little more on the exhausted edge. Want to take a little break, eat some food. Maybe I'll come back and work on Big Betty. It really depends on how much time I have available tonight. So, this is where we're at. If you tuned into the last stream, I haven't really done anything since tuning other than putting these buses out here. But I think these buses were already there. So you heard what it sounded like on the in the intermission music. Oh, I did make some slight adjustments. So this Drake pad that I really like, I actually applied to, I kind of did some variations throughout here. I like it, I think. I might filter it a little bit more or something, but we'll see. There's that glide up that I talked about. So glides up, glides down. And what I did for this was I basically took the chords. I think I showed this in the last video, but I basically take the chords and then I turned it into MIDI, and then I chose the notes that were on the bottom to basically use as kind of a reference point. Goes back to that root note, down. Kind of changes from light to dark between the hook and the verse. That clicking sound is the sidechain, by the way. And I could adjust the glide if I wanted to. Let's see here, what else? So yeah, I mean, this track definitely needs some like chops and cuts and stuff like that. But I kind of want to work on mixing. Obviously, I could probably add some more sounds, but sometimes I think the challenge with producing music is really knowing when is too much, and then knowing when is too much, when is enough, and then when is not enough, and really kind of trusting your instincts and how you feel with it. I know like earlier tracks of mine, like I think if I Bass Savage. So prior to learning a lot of these techniques, I released this track back in 2018, and I feel like I definitely probably did too much. It's terribly mixed. I mean, it sounds cool, it's just terribly mixed. There's just a lot going on, and it's all like taking up the same space. 2 monthly listeners. It's like myself and my girlfriend. Like all the sounds are really cool, but there's no space. It's all like monoed. And like the bass is too low and just doesn't really have any space or anything like that. So, maybe someday I'll remaster that or remix that. So yeah, I mean, knowing when you need some more and then knowing when you've gone way too far. I think if I can give 2 pieces of advice to how to figure that out, it would be active listening. So spend time, I know it's hard because when you're spending a lot of time making music, sometimes when you're not making music, you don't want to listen to any music because you're just worn out. So I listen to like podcasts. But spending time to really to find the songs that you really like or songs that really stand out to you and kind of catch you off guard and actively listen to what is going on in those tracks. I think that can really benefit you when you come back to think about when is too much and when is not enough. I think a good example of just the right amount, but it feels like it's not the right amount, is that Billie Eilish Bad Guy song that recently won a Grammy or something like that. I don't pay attention to those. That song is nothing, when it comes to the verse. It's a bass, a filtered drums, and her voice. And that's enough. Imagine Bad Guy with more stuff in it. It would be too much. It would detract away from the quality that makes that song unique, which is its minimalism. But then when it goes into the drop or the verse or the chorus, it brings out more of those sounds. And that's the tension and release. That's the knowing when is enough and when is too much. There's a really good book, I think it's called The Addiction Method. It's written by the guy who has a YouTube channel, Holistic Songwriting. And honestly, if you haven't checked out Holistic Songwriting, let me pull it up. If you haven't checked out this website, you're missing out. You should listen to some of the stuff that he says. He's got degrees in music and stuff like that, does it, all sorts of different stuff. But this guy, in his looking at how, at different artists, everything from Tool to System of a Down to 21 Pilots, he really goes in depth into why these songs work. So, check that website out. Check that YouTube channel out. And his book, it's on Amazon. Buy it. So I think so the number one thing is actively listening. And I think the second thing is honestly just taking the time and doing it. And the more you do it and the better you get at it, the more you'll realize, oh, I've gone too far, or oh, I need a little bit more, or oh, this is perfect. And I think sometimes that relies also on just like playing music for people that you trust who also know music, and sharing these things with them, not keeping them just to yourself, but sharing these things with them and having them kind of give you feedback, and then also knowing like when is good feedback and when it's bad feedback. Obviously take any feedback with a grain of salt. You don't know why they might be telling you what they're telling you, but listen and ask. I think if you are in that space where you're like, you've got your sound design down, you understand the music that you're making, and you're putting together full tracks, and you're just trying to get to that next spot where it's like, when do I have a song that's good enough? Those things, active listening, and like the feedback that you get from people, are really going to be what takes you to the next level. Zach will send me a beat, and then I will arrange it, and I will, make adjustments and changes because he, made it, but then it's my job to kind of figure out, okay, does this track need some noise? Does it need some ambience? Does it need some percussion? Does it need like a pad line or a bass line or effects or whatnot? And then taking that information and that stuff and applying it to the track, and then sending it back to him and having him take a look, and then sharing it with Derek, who's another guy in our group, and having him listen to it and say, oh, the bass is too much, or oh, this and that, and kind of sharing that between the three of us, and then other people that we each know, really helps us know, are we at the right place, or do we need to add more to this track? So that's kind of my my rant on building a track. I think this track right now has enough. What it needs is like chops. Those things don't necessarily affect my mixing, unless we start adding like effects to make the track work. But I think at this point I can basically say that the track is good for like a good like rough mix. So what I would then do is go through these tracks and think about, are they sitting where they need to sit? So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that stuff. And I might not talk as much because I feel my voice kind of straining, so I don't want to kill my voice. But I'm going to go section by section and kind of listen, adjust some levels before I then send everything and create stems out of them. So let's start. I'm going to turn off the sidechain. I will say one of the challenges with mixing to some of these loops is, like, as you can tell, this melody pad has these like bells. I wish that I had those bells separate. That would allow me to then mix those better in with everything a little bit to my own liking. But another thing that I could do with that, what I could do with that is try to find those bells and kind of just pull them back a little bit. So I think those problematic frequencies are up there in this higher register. Trick is to shorten the cue size, boost the gain, and then sweep the frequency. And that'll help you figure out where things are at and allows you to better mix it if you don't have like a perfectly tuned ear. So a little bit of subtractive EQing right here is super useful for kind of fine tuning these sounds. Another thing that I could do is use a multiband compressor to make those same adjustments. So I could pull up in my audio effects the multiband dynamics. And what I can do is I can solo out from a certain frequency. So like right here, we're at 3. So let me just, I think 2 is fine. I'm going to turn off the high, these, and then listen to it. And so I'm kind of isolating these frequencies. And what I can do is I can adjust the compression. So obviously that's way too much, but that allows me to then say, oh, I think I have the right area. So if I then it allows me to basically play with it. So let's A/B it. See how it pushes forward a lot here? So I feel like that does kind of help a little bit. This is just a little bit of like surgery that I would say. I'm not going to try to recreate this loop, and I don't think that this loop is dividable. So, I just kind of have to deal with what I have and figure out with the tools that I have, how can I make it work. And so doing things like EQ, multiband compression, stuff like that allows you to kind of fine tune the sound. So let's hear it all together. And if I wanted to, what I could have done is rather than just using the highs, I could have applied the same to this, which allows me to keep some of the air at the top, which I'm probably not going to mess with. I feel like that's a lot more work. Also, I feel like the higher registers there, I could probably add some vinyl crackle or something like that allows to fill in those higher spaces that I'm basically cutting out a little bit here. But honestly, with the drums added in, it may not even matter. So let's hear what it all sounds like together. And this is also super important that a lot of people leave out. I can make it this sound really good. And you're like, oh man, those bells hit so hard. But when you start to throw in all the drums and stuff like that, like you kind of lose the drums. So you then have to say, okay, well, where's a good balance of like the bells being present with the drums not totally taking all of the sound out. And then I also think about, well, I do know that like down the road I'm going to be like limiting, so you know, some of these sounds are going to get louder, so I have to kind of balance all of those perspectives in my mind. A lot of mixing, at least from my experience, is having a plan, having some sort of schematic, and then keeping in mind what I'm going to do in the future, and then kind of going back and forth. So. Also, something you got to be careful with, at least for myself, you spend a lot of time fine-tuning, then a sound will sound very present and clear, and then you're like, oh, it's annoying, I don't like that, it's too present, and then you realize it's actually not too present. When you play it for someone, they don't even notice it. So don't get too hung up on some sounds. Allow yourself to hear it in the context, and then step away from it, focus on something else, come back. You might realize that, oh, you've just kind of grown used to those sounds, and you've devoted your attention into hearing those sounds, and at this point it's just a matter of like you just they're too you're too focused on it, so you kind of got to step back. I think that's all the work I'm going to do right now on the synth. Yeah, because there's already some reverb that's there. I want to keep the signal at, like, kind of where it's at in the hook, because the reverb in those places, the intro, outro, and break are gonna be that differentiating factor. And then I'm gonna be adding some reverb and stuff like that later. So, great. Let's move on. So there's the synth. I'm going to mute that. Actually, I'm going to solo. Effects is pretty straightforward. Don't have a lot of effect. It's just a riser. And honestly, it sounds pretty good already where it's at. So I am not going to screw around with that. Let me kill the sidechain on that, because we're not focusing on that right now. All right. Drums. Yeah. So, 200. There we go. This is something to watch out for. We want to. I mean, the kick's already kind of in. Yeah, it's already like a mono channel, but just to be on the safe side, in case there's anything else that's done to it, adjusting, putting the utility and then setting the bass mono to a place just kind of is kind of that, like, it's kind of just like that gate, that wall to prevent you from your processing, from making your sound more stereo. Same thing for this bass, which is only there a little bit. 200 bass, yeah. So you can kind of, you can also hear kind of where it's at. So if we were to go to this kick right here, that's what's getting monoed. Yeah. And something you could theoretically do then is you could say, all right, duplicate that. Keep the bass, or actually we don't even have to duplicate it. We can keep this here, and we could say, hey, let's widen it. So it kind of takes the top end, you got the low end, and then you got the top end right here. But I don't really do that too much. I kind of leave it at a normal width. This also allows, you could actually adjust it between mid-side balance too. Pushes everything to the side, keeps everything in mono. but it looks like it cuts that. It looks like this happens first and then this happens. So watch out for that. The way to get around this would be to duplicate it, turn this off, or keep this. Oh, you would have to probably create 2 signal chains and to make it work, because I think what's going to happen is the flow is going to get sent into here, and then I guess you could theoretically create a group, but it doesn't really matter. I'm happy with where the kick's at right here. I think the only thing that I might do is, just to help myself out a little bit, adjust this to mid side. This blue right here is the mid. What I can actually do, sometimes I do this, is I will cut like that, and I'll swap over. And then what I'm doing is I'm cutting the side right now. So that's the only part right there that's on the side. Everything else is in the mid. And that can really, honestly, is a really great way of like shaping. Let me duplicate this so we can A/B it. So that's the kick, the 808. That's the kick with just the stereo EQ, and that's the kick with the mid-side EQ. It kind of tightens the sound, in my opinion. Now, I like using a multi-band compression. It honestly sounds really good where it's at. I mean, it was a really good sample, but like, what else can we do with it? And so adding multi-band compressor, this is probably going to be a lot. Yeah. So that's cool, but it's really loud. So it's like crushing it. So, oops. I don't want that. Shoot. Now I'm screwing myself up. Undo. 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 There we go. So what we could do here is basically pull it back a little bit. So that's kind of cool. Gives it a little more of a punch. Also, the output is pushed. This is what's being done to it. So we're giving it a little bit more volume, and then we are adding a little bit of compression to it. This could be done in like any multi-band compressor, but this is a great plugin because it allows you to really visualize what's going on. Da, 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 da. I'm still learning a lot of like what these different things do. So, I'm gonna leave that off. It doesn't really matter. I'm not really noticing a whole lot of a difference. So there's that. You can adjust the ratios. Yeah. So let's hear what the drums sound like together. it gives just a little bit, which is nice. Great. There's the kick. What we can do, honestly, I'm gonna do this. I really like to group things because it allows me to copy paste and turn stuff off a lot easier. So, I mean, this is basically a trash. This was more of like a reference. I'm gonna put that in black, apply, and then eventually I'm rename this trash. I don't like to get rid of stuff until I know that I'm ready to get rid of it. So we got kick 2. Let's oh, why did we turn that off? Excuse me, why did I turn that off? Group off. So there's a kick. Let's take this and apply it to, so I'm going to call this kick 1. Apply it here. Oh, we got to keep in mind this is only being used for this, like, it's not really doing a whole lot. Yeah, I mean, I think this kick is more of just kind of a little bit of and some other tricks that you can do is you can actually put a utility in the front to like slam the signal through these I don't know why we still have this here, to slam the signal through this and then put a utility on the out. So let me demo that. So what you can, it's a kind of a nifty little trick. It's almost its own like limiter, if I'm thinking about that right. But let's say we wanted to, so I remember this 611. So what if, so one thing you could do is you could say, well, I want to set the gain to like 0. And then, oh, this is going to be useless on here. I'll do it like this. I think that's good there. So on like this kick right here, right? Let's say we copied it, pasted it, and then put it in here. What we could do is we could say, let's slam this, but let's pull this back by like negative 35 actually. Let's do negative 35. So we're like boosting the output gain at like an insane amount, and then we're pulling back that same signal by the same amount as we're boosting it. So what that's going to do is it's going to slam the signal through these processors, and then it's immediately going to pull it back. So maybe you want a little more crunchy of a sound. And then let's do this. Let's copy, paste. Important is this A bean. So what if we did this? Negative 35. But what we're going to do on this one is we're going to keep it like normal. So we can A-B this now. Like this is the one with that gain at the utility at the front and the bottom. None. It's not super noticeable, but there is something there. In fact, I kind of like it, so I'm probably going to leave it for this. It like gives it a little bit of extra crunch. Reverse kick, don't really need to do much there. I think it sounds good. I've got a second reverse kick. Why do I have 2 reverse kicks? Oh, I think one of them... Yeah, that's dumb. Oh, this is the... Well, now I feel like I need both of them. I don't. Get rid of that. All right, moving on to the snares. So we've got this snare. It's a really like tingy, I don't know, that's the best term I can describe it, tingy snare. I mean, there sounds like there's a little bit of a clap in that snare. Then we have this clap. It's very quiet, but I'm like trying to kind of find that balance. Some of the things you can do if you want to make it unique, you can actually slide that snare, slide the sample, like give it a little bit of a delay. So like if we were to demonstrate that, say we did like pushed it forward, right? By like 3 milliseconds. Let me just solo the snares. You hear how they're not on time? Sorry, I'm responding to some messages. All right. So yeah, so you can adjust the delay a little bit, whether it's like 13 or negative 13. It kind of gives like a little, it gives a little of extra texture or laziness to the sound, which is great. I don't think I'm going to do that, though, for this track, but just something to keep in mind. Because I'm more using that clap right now as just kind of some extra sound qualities. So for the snares, I like to cut the snares, so I'm probably going to keep it that way, where I cut the snares at a certain place. So for the snare, I'm cutting there. For the clap, I'm cutting there. I want the snares to kind of sit right in the middle with the kick. It's like the kick is the low, the snare is kind of right above it. Sometimes offsetting it just a tad can be nicely, like if I put it to like negative, -3 or 3. That's 3L. So yeah, I mean that's kind of, let's say 2. Just allows you to make a nice little bit of space. Honestly, I'll probably put a little bit of a mid-side EQ as well on this, just to really clean stuff up. Stereo, mid-side. So, clean up the bottom. And then pull back. But then I think what I could do is boost. But you got to be careful because like right now there's like no signal, side signal. So what I can actually do, that sample is pretty monoed out. I mean, I could add some stuff to it that would basically allow it to have a bit more middle range, but honestly keeping it this way might be better. But we can play with the clap here, because the clap is has a side frequency. Oh. And does a little bit. Doesn't do a whole lot, but it does a little bit. And honestly, I feel like you feel most of what it's doing when it comes to just where everything sits. I mean, you could dump it. And it's, I don't know, maybe it's a placebo effect, but I definitely sense just a slight difference between the two. And I feel like those sorts of feelings are what's important. That's why I like to wear my headphones, to kind of do some of this like mixing. No claps here, so I'm just going to get rid of this channel. No rims. But we got our hats. This track's got a lot of hats, so... I feel like hats are a good place. Maybe not this channel, but the hats could definitely be a good place where some cleanup. Also, I like to add little things sometimes to the hats, some little movement pieces. So like I would toss on something like ensemble. Or like chorus effect. It just kind of pulls things back and makes them move a little bit. And then we can do... this a little bit. Kind of pulls it back a little bit. Da, da, da. None of these have any of these like side frequencies. What's going on? All right. Well, we will leave these guys alone. Oh, yeah. So I guess I could push these a little bit. A little bit to the right. A little bit to the left. So that's useful. The ride. Or the open hi-hat ride thingy. You know, it's fun. Maybe a little bit of a frequency shift. Some perks. I feel like these perks are definitely going to need a little bit of reverb, and I might go ahead and just add the reverb here, and then they'll get a little more reverb later, but it's not a ton, just a little bit of reverb. I think that is pretty nice. I think those drums just sound good now. And so, like, this is a good example of where you might say, wow, that reverb, it's really present, blah, 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 blah. But then when you put it in context of the rest of the song, it's not really noticeable. And what's great is I can always come back and I can always tighten up these effect, like these like reverb if I wanted to. If for whatever reason down the road, when I'm in the mixing stage, I just don't like something, I can always, by adjusting the signal, it's going to adjust the rest. So it's slow, minimal changes, but nonetheless, I can do changes nonetheless. I'm probably going to... might cut a little bit off on the top. Now we got the bass. Now, I know that there's definitely some... So something I might do, I just want to see if this changes things. If I command U, quantize it, like how does that... And then copy that over. And then I can do the same here. So what happens now is kind of the question that I have. Does it still match the vibe, you know? Yeah, I think that's better. So just in case, I'm going to trash group it. adjustments. Conceive. D, 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 D. D. Oop. Oh, V. There we go. And then we need this, guys. Boom, boom, boom. Copy. And paste it here. So what we've done there is we've basically just kind of quantized the sound like to the beat that it should be on. When Ableton tried to analyze the groove, where the MIDI notes hit, it just wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't quite where it needed to be. Now what I'm gonna do is listen to the music to see if that's the bass sound that we like. Part of the issue that I'm having, this funky bass has some weird like reverb on the top. I don't know if I like it. But it does kind of give it character. So one thing I was cleaning up was I realized that there was a MIDI, there was like a sidechain MIDI trigger on a note that did not have a kick on it, so I wanted to make sure that that was cleaned up. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like, I feel like the 808's there. It probably needs a slide somewhere. I couldn't figure out where the hell to put the slide at, so I've kind of left the slide alone. But, you know, it's like, there's definitely something that it needs. I don't know if it's like a drum fill or what, but I'm going to go ahead and mix it as it is because, it's not bad where it's at, and I want to kind of get a good mix in before it gets chopped up and whatnot. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, what I like to do is I like to leave the routing down to the mix buses off for right now, because this is where I'm going to have to come in and actually do that work. So what we want to do is I need to send all of the audio into these stems. So what I can do actually is I'm going to take the synth. I'm going to send the synth to the synth. I'm going to take the snare or the FX. I'm going to send the FX to the FX. I'm going to send the drums to the drums. And I'm going to send the 808 to the 808. And then what I got to keep in mind is all of these are going to be ins. This is where things get a little tricky. You just kind of have to keep in your mind, like, what's going on. And then all of these are going to get recorded. So what I can then do, I don't want it to loop because I don't want it to just start back over again, is I'm basically writing all of these things from the synth to the 808. I'm writing them into these channels, which I'm then going to turn off and mix those later on down to the master. So we get a chance to listen to the song the whole way through. Not sure why there's no audio right now. But that's the case. I wonder if I just sent this to the master here. Nope. And delete automation. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. So, so this is part of the process. It's just writing everything out. You can kind of see everything. Like, it's getting written out. I just can't hear it, which is not the end of the world. Sometimes giving your ears a break is nice. Yeah. I'm definitely planning on making this a more regular business. I think it's like, why not live stream when I'm mixing? I mean, I guess I mix a little faster when I'm not live streaming, but I feel like this information is like important. I feel like the more that I do this, the more that I'll get faster at it anyway. So if I'm a little slow at it right now, that's just how it's going to have to be. And then I will get better at it. I think there's some things that I won't be able to live stream, but like definitely these beats, I'm going to do my best to live stream as many of them as possible. It gives you a chance to kind of hear what we're doing. I can shout them out a little bit and, so luckily this is a short song. So, obviously this takes up time. from other things, but I feel like it's an important process, and maybe down the road I'll realize it doesn't really help me the way that I thought it did, but for now, writing these out into stems is great. And that's it. And then what we can do is turn these all off, set these all to auto, or actually off because it doesn't really matter. I have the stems turned off. And then there's no audio. Ooh, I wonder... Oh, there we go. So they're all really quiet. I'm going to pull these all up to 0 because that's what they were written into as. This also gives me a chance to listen to them and see if it's missing something. I do feel like that kick is probably going, or the 808s are going to have something that's a little bit more clicky on them, because right now there's like an 808 thing right here where there's no kicks that are kind of giving it its power. And maybe that's, I don't know. We'll have to see it down the road. I'll share it with Zach and then we'll discuss. So I have my stems. These stems are going to get routed into the master, but I'm not going to deal with them right now. So basically the routing for these is all of these guys are getting routed into this, and this is getting sent into the master as a dry signal. These will all get auto, the volume is going to get adjusted based on how much I need in the master. But basically at this point, I could ignore these. These are going to get dealt with, like they're like the last thing that I deal. So now what I want to do is I just want to make sure that all of these are getting routed in properly. So synth routed into synth bus. FX is going to get routed into FX bus. Drums are going to get routed into drum bus. 808 is getting routed into 808 bus. Stems are left alone. Now, what's important, right? Like these are all set to ins now. So you say, well, what about these guys? Like, where are they getting? Well, I'm glad you asked. So reverb is getting sent into plate bus, plate reverb, basically. Delay is getting sent into the delay bus. And then the overhead, which is going to be kind of the room noise, is getting sent into the room bus. So those get sent there. I found that pre is nice. I don't know. I'm keeping these where they're at right now, but they might get adjusted down the road. All of these should have FX on them. So the reverb has this reverb on there. The delay has 2 delays. One that's more of like a really short delay, and one that's kind of a little bit longer. And then the overhead is just like another reverb that I have. And so then when I go into here, I'm not really doing a ton here other than adding another reverb that's a little bit bigger. Oh, excuse me. It's a actual plate into here. So the reverb here is kind of getting transformed here. And all of the signals, so the reason why I have to do it this way is since I'm already sending these ins to these, and I have no idea if you can like do more than one in. Like, I guess I could, but I just felt like this is the best way. So what I could do is so for example, like synth, I could say I want this individual instrument to only have a small amount of signal being sent into these, and then I can adjust accordingly. I don't know if that makes any sense. Then what I got to keep in mind is this bus is getting sent into not the master, but the premix. Well, excuse me. this bus is basically going to get ignored. The synth bus is sent into premix. The FX bus should be sent into the FX mix. Or the effects. Drum bus sent to the master. 808 is sent to the premix. The room sent to the effects, boom. Yeah, so the only thing that we had to make sure is that the FX is getting sent to the FX. And then the premix here is getting sent to the master out. The effects here is getting sent to master out, and then master out, or master, and then the master here is getting sent to the actual master out. And the idea is, I mean, these are basically a premix bus, FX bus, master bus, and then this is the master out. So yeah. And then I like to have on my master out this insight. I also drop a limiter in case something bad happens. And sometimes a little glue compressor with like just a soft clip on it. I'm going to leave it like that. But this is what's important. This literally like really tells me the information that I need to know. I don't need this layout. So, yeah. I think I kind of kept the stuff that I had on here because I just really liked it. I'll be playing around with it, but I did create some racks that maybe at some point I'll share this whole template with people. But basically, in my mix routing, I have, like, for example, there's this 808 bus. I have this, which is like the same thing. Just grouped in. So that way, if I'm starting like say I want to go back to a track that I was mixing 2 days ago and I didn't use this particular routing, I could just pull that bus in, delete what's on there, and go from there. Let me check something. Make sure. Cool. Everything's still recording nicely. Small CPU. Awesome. So yeah. So I mean, that's kind of what's going on here. They're just not grouped. Because this is, I just kind of used the same template over. Play, delay, premix. So yeah, premix is where it's going to get the sidechain. That's it. FX is going to get the sidechain, and then the master, I'm going to keep it clean because that's where the drums are at, and we don't need to sidechain it. There will be probably some sort of multi-band that gets dropped here because I'm going to want to fine tune that. Yeah. So it could be a little tricky dealing with this. I've noticed that sometimes where I'll be like screwing around with this. I'm like, why do I hear everything else? And it's because if I just solo this, so say I turn everything on. So something to watch for when you solo, it should solo, when you solo something, it's going to like solo it and then anything that it goes into. So like soloing the synth bus mutes these, but it keeps the premix and the master. The problem is the premix, wouldn't you know, it has other stuff getting sent into it still. So, like, if I just solo the synth bus, ideally, it might play still some other stuff. So if I do this... Whoa, that's loud. I apologize. Let's kill these limiters. I hope I didn't ruin anyone's ears with that. I mean, I guess it only plays a synth, but you gotta be careful. I think I had this issue when I was like trying to figure out like some of the reverb or delay or like some of these returns. just trying to figure out where audio is coming from. But maybe I'll talk more about that at another time. But I'm going to get to some work. So let me kill everything that's there. I don't need on the synth this sidechain. It's doing nothing. This is where it gets tricky using some of these already kind of like templates. Is you get some weird sounds. So like this is what the synth sounds like, but there's like something is getting sent. Because I think what's happening... I want to make sure my volume levels aren't insane. So, like, I'm gonna want to send... everything in the synth bus to the overhead. And this is where it gets tricky. It's like, I want to hear what's being sent, but... So what I can do is I can actually mute some of these things. I do need the room. So another thing that I could do if I wanted to is I could just route this to the out, the master out if I'm struggling, and then hear what happens when I do this. And then just check out these different... and actually mute. So ideally, this is supposed to... supposed to give me something. Oh, that's why. Because the overheads are being sent to the room bus. So if we send those to the master... I'm probably going to have to figure out a cleaner way of doing this, because this is kind of a pain. And I'll send this back to the room bus. And send this back to the synth bus. And then you don't know why it's not working. Oh, premix. But I feel like, so a lot of this, it's like you can kind of play it by feeling. So that's another thing I could do, is I could just route it. And then I could go one by another. So we're right now just listening to what the returns are sending to the effects. So if we start adding stuff like this, and maybe I want to add some of this to the overhead. Let's see if I add some drums. Um... Oh, that's why. Yeah, there we go. So we could start hearing kind of what... So that's the room, right? We're right now supposed to hear kind of like the space that it operates in. So we could say, let's pull that. Everything's hitting here. Now keep in mind, you've got a kick drum in there, so you don't want like a ton of reverb on your kick unless you're trying to create a very open space. And I would probably, maybe I'll send... So I like kind of starting, like when I do this, I like to start with the sends here. Because they could be the trickiest to kind of make sure that you're sending enough signal. I do like having a little bit of delay. Now keep in mind, a little goes a long way because when we start sending this signal in, it's going to have more. So I think we can actually... I guess we're already sending a signal, so it doesn't really matter. You're hearing what it's going to sound like with everything on it. But we can do this, because that's going to be important. And this allows you to really, like, create a space for all these things. So I think that's honestly good enough. I'm not going to like resend these things back in, so you could essentially ignore what they have here. This is more about sending the right amount in, right? So if I pull back on the room, that's going to give more of the... Why is this happening? Why is there some weird stuff going on? Sometimes this stuff is a pain in the ass. I'm really just trying to get a better grasp of all this. Let's pull back the drums. Maybe it's because it's all on pre. It's like sometimes these sends will like, so it'll just be the smallest thing that is causing this issue. And it's just a matter, sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out like, why is that happening? I mean, there's some sort of latency I think that's going on, to be honest. I mean, another thing I could honestly do is, rather than sending the signal to here and then adjusting it, I could just go in through here and adjust it. Yeah, I think I might go with it. No, because I've already written them and... I guess I'm just going to have to figure out why this is happening. Post mixer pre. I mean, if I really wanted to... No, that doesn't even work. No, I was supposed to place everything on top. I'm going to leave this alone for now. Actually, I'm gonna focus on this. So what I can do now So the goal of what I'm about to do, which is limiting, is to basically monitor the loudness and push it as close to the loudness before it crunches. So there's something going on that is essentially preventing me from like slamming this. Because I'm not hitting very high. Let's see here. I'm gonna take a quick break, and then I'm actually gonna have to probably end this stream. I just got a notification. We'll come back and attack this at another point while I figure out some of the issues of why everything is, why some of these things are crunching, and I'll think about it and then I'll show what's going on a bit later. Appreciate you guys all tuning in, and look forward to streaming some more with you. All right?